Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. Thank you for being here. If you're new to the show, we'll have a short presentation. And then at the end of that presentation, I'll be answering your questions. Before we get started, if you would always remember, be respectful of families, of the mods, and of each other. And I appreciate everybody being here tonight. And so now we'll get started. All right. We're going to be talking about the Kohberger trial that will be coming up, as he has been charged with the homicides of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana. And if you have any information on this case, absolutely make sure the authorities know it, and that we so that we can have justice for them. And with that, we'll go into the presentation. One of the things that we're going to be looking at as we move forward, and the reason I created this specific show is just like with the Murdoch trial, there's going to be some evidence coming into the courts, and I want people to be as aware and familiar with some of the things that will be introduced. I don't know if they're going to be able, if it's going to be on TV or broadcast with the YouTubers or not, but we'll see. And if it's so, we don't know what type of evidence we'll be able to see. If it's as it's going with the way that they're doing things currently, having everything sealed and redacted and everything. So I don't know if there's a lot of hope for it to be televised, but we'll see as we move forward. But part of the case, and a real big part of this case, would be there would be a lot of different types of blood evidence introduced into, such as what the shoe print that was referred to within the probable cause affidavit. And then, of course, we have the DNA that was obtained off of the knife sheath that was in one of the rooms of the victims. And so there's going to be a lot of different types of evidence brought into the case. But one of the ones that I have a lot of knowledge and have seen a lot of is going to be in the understanding of blood patterns and how law enforcement, when we enter into a scene, and in this case, we have 4 victims. And we would have 4 encounters, and all the victims are suffering injuries from a edged weapon, the knife. And through those violent struggles and encounters, there will be a lot of different types of injuries that would be where blood spatter would occur, transfers would occur, and it would absolutely be a scene from a nightmare. And trying to understand how law enforcement would enter in and figure out what blood droplets and what does the blood pattern and the analysis means, and how can you interpret and track an offender and a victim through that type of scene. And of course, that is a matter of training and going to the schools. And there's no way in 1 hour I would be able to cover all the different types of blood patterns and show you all different types of how it would be interpreted. But we'll hit some of the highlights, and you'll be able to, at the end of this, you'll see that there's certain things that once you understand what some of the blood pattern appears, that you can start understanding. And from the spatter patterns that are created when there's some type of action or force greater than gravity that's put on a drop of blood, or even a pool of blood, that it creates things that are repetitive if it's the same action at different scenes. And so you can go in there and interpret. And once you have the training, you can go back and see everything that you learned in your classroom, and you learn has some bearing on the scenes. And then from scene to scene, as your abilities and your training is reinforced, you're able to go into that scene and see what the blood trails tells you. And that's all about what blood spatter patterns analysis is about. You'll have cast off blood, impact, projected blood. You'll have things such as shadowing or ghosting, whereas if there's some different types of blood spatter that occur, and everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Ruckus is here.
Hey, Ray Ruckus, I'm glad to see you. If by chance y'all get a chance, go out and check Ruckus Rocks podcast. I had a great conversation with him today. Looking forward to the growth of his channel. He does some great interviews, and I appreciate you being here, bud. And but when we go out and we analyze these crime scenes, and you, like I said, you'll have what is called shadowing and ghosting, and that is simply that during certain acts of an attack and during those physical encounters, that especially with high velocity impacts or high velocity blood spatter, we'll have a ghosting effect. Whereas when the kinetic energy is introduced into that the body or to that the source of blood, it will spray out into a fine mist from everything of every different type of blood droplet you can imagine, and it casts out in 360 degrees, and it will create a ghosting effect that if you have a object that is very close to that blood source, that it'll hit that blood source and everything behind it will be clean. And that's all that shadowing or ghosting is. And then, of course, you have wipes and swipes that can occur during the struggles, or as an individual walks through a home and he has any type of blood on his hands, bodies, shoes, that would maybe wipe or swipe, and it isn't a clean, clear transfer. And expirated blood, which is anything from the lungs, coughing, um, um, choking, and when it is mixed with that, and you put any type of air into it, it'll go into a fine mist and almost resemble high velocity blood spatter, and through that misty pattern. So, but you learn all this in the different courses. And then you have your drip stain patterns and blood dripping into blood that creates certain type of pooling. I'll show you some of that. You'll have your transfer stains, which we looked at the shoe patterns, which all that is a type of the bloody transfer of one pattern onto another, so you can identify it. And of course, like I said, there's far more stuff to it than just this, but we can't all cover it in an hour, so we'll start with this. I took one of the poster boards that I had Mrs. Steve walk on last week that had the shoe pattern. And I went in and I created everything from 90-degree droplets to different types of velocity, some wipes, swipes, touches, transfers of just about anything you can imagine, 90-degree drops, so that you can see that on this board here, looking at it, you see a mass of synthetic blood, and all this stuff that you'll see tonight is from synthetic blood. It's not real blood. It's just synthetic blood. But you'll be able to look at this and say, okay, what does this here tell you? It looks very confusing, and it would be if you're just saying, oh, this is all different type. Now, what does it mean? And that's what this broadcast is about. Try to bring some organization and logic to the process. Since the victims were, of course, in their bed, and they may be wearing clothing, and of course you have your bed sheeting, mattress protectors, and you have a lot of cloth patterns that are in homes, in the bedrooms. I went out and I created some of these patterns so that you would see what certain things look like on cloth. That if someone's being attacked with a knife, and if that knife comes in contact with that sheet, if it's the side of the knife, it will create a profile such as what you see where the knife profile transfer is. And if you took that knife and you just did a straight cut across that sheet, you see the cutting edge of the blade. You see that swipe mark, and it'd be a very narrow. And will we be seeing that in the trial? Very possible. You might see one or the other or both of these, since that we're talking about at least 2 bedrooms that this occurred in, and the attacks happened on the bed. And so you may have those sheet patterns, and like I said, pillows, all of it would transfer the same. Then over here on the left-hand side, I did a thumbprint of what it would look like of just taking your thumb. That would be possibly some type of transfer from blood to a sheet. And then I did what the fingertips would look like in case someone was had taken a partial of their hand. And you can see full hand imprints. And at the end of the show, I'll show you what a full hand imprint looks like on dark clothing. For the fact I don't know, and it hasn't been released that I know of, what type of night clothes any of the victims had on. We don't know if they were white, medium colors, shades, or if they were dark colors. Because even on their clothing, during these struggles, if Kohberger had become his hands soaked, or his gloves, whatever he's wearing, that had any type of blood on, it would allow for transfers to occur. And those transfers may or may not be identifiable easily, but there's always hope that they would be, and you would be able to identify them through other processes, such as introduction of luminol if it's some type of dark clothing and you can't clearly see what blood transfer evidence may be there. Because there's a lot of stuff that you can learn from cloth, especially about, you can see the clear outline profile of the blade on this knife profile transfer. And you can also, over on the forehand right, you can see just where the tip in the bottom right-hand corner is. That was just the tip of the knife. So you could be able to tell what the profile of that knife was. Then we go over here to another part of the diagram of that poster board, and you start seeing some of these 90-degree droplets. So if you have all this blood spatter out there and you're looking for something that looks different than the background, and that's what you see here. You see from cast off 1 down at the bottom right-hand corner of these droplets, and you see all of them. There's a different sizes that occur during the cast off of a weapon, or even different types of velocity, low velocity, mid velocity, or high velocity blood spatter. And you go in there and you look and you start seeing these things that are absolutely different, such as the 90-degree ones. And when you see 90 degrees, it will get your attention real quick, for the fact that either it's from one of the victims that is standing in that location, or it's from some type of weapon that is at that location held by an offender, or it's the blood from the offender. And from those things, that's how come I, in all my crime scenes, when I was looking at some of the blood spatter, that when I found this type of blood droplet, it was what I was looking for. That is what I would be collecting. Of course, all these other blood droplets, you can say, well, they all seem to have a consistency of maybe the linear links of them. And you would say, oh, this is something interesting. And so of all the ones I would collect first would be the 90 degrees. Of course, you document, photograph, and then you collect. And then you see these cast off number 2 up here that is from a different direction. And it has a very acute angle of cast off. So that tells you that something else occurred to create where you see the cast off number 2 and those little droplets. And so those are things that would excite a CSI investigator on a crime scene, looking for the things that from the background pattern, because it's not like you're painting a room that's solid colors. You're going to have this blood spatter that is just cast around the room, and you have to identify the things that stand out within that pattern, such as this. And then you have something such as this, that you see the shoe pattern, and then you see some of these 90 degrees that's on top of the shoe pattern. And that's just layering. And that means that the shoe pattern was laid some point earlier than this blood droplet being there. So there was some type of movement by whoever was walking in the crime scene and moved away and possibly came back into this area at some point and dropped these 90-degree blood droplets. And also this cast off occurred later, such as might occur with a second victim, that there was a fight occurred in a certain part of the room. There was certain types of blood transfers, such as a shoe print, and then you attack a second victim, and whatever happens on the second victim can be cast over any type of evidence that you left while you was attacking the first victim. And these are things that you will see in your document, and it's just a matter of layering it and trying to interpret for the fact that if this blood drop, the 90-degree blood drop, had been dropped first, then the shoe print came and stepped on it, you would see the shoe print embedded into that blood drop, and you don't have it, so you can tell which came first. The shoe print came first, the blood drop came second. And then just like the same with the cast off. The shoe print came first, the cast off came second. And then we have a cast off with a knife tip impact to surface. Anytime you're some type of encounter and you're using a weapon in closed quarters, and people are fighting, and you may hit the walls or ceiling, door frames, hallways, that as someone will draw that knife back, in this case, it had already been, I had saturated the surface with synthetic blood. And as I cast off or draw the knife back, I struck the surface, and it created this impact point where you see the defect in that surface. And that defect in the surface, you can see here in the next picture, where I did a little bit more contrasting. You see these little droplets that lead off the tip of that weapon. And that is the cast off all the way as the knife was coming back, and I was getting ready to return the weapon into the close quarter battle and introduce it into a victim, or ever how the offender would do. That when it struck this, it left that little track of blood spatter, cast off all the way to exactly to the tip. And so I wanted to show you that these are things that happen in crime scenes, and it would tell you, what type of instrument, because if it's a hammer, it's a lot of times you'll be able to identify that hammer, a ball bat, piece of pipe. There's just people have bludgeoned other people with blunt force trauma, and they've used everything in the world from rocks to pipes. So you'll just about see everything on some time on these assaults and homicides. Then we have the 90-degree drops, and there'll be pooling sometimes, and you can see that. And this is something else that in the crime scene world that the CSI guys really get excited about, for the fact that the further away that you have these 90-degree droplets in any part of the crime scene, and it's away from any of the victims, which could be a blood source, the further away it is from a victim, then the more likely it belongs to the offender. And that's what we want. And that's how that's what we really want to collect. When you start seeing a lot of these 90-degree droplets that's 20, 30, 40 feet away from a victim, then that's a good sign that the offender has suffered some type of injury. And because it takes a sustained blood flow to have this occur. And you can see where the drop falls into another drop, and you'll get these little radiating, small, minute droplets that cast off. And you can do it in your kitchen or anything with water. You'll see how it will splash, and it's very similar. It works in the same process. But like I said, the further away that you find these 90-degree droplets in any quantity, then we're starting to understand that, yes, our offender has been injured. And this is what we look for, and this is what we hope for. All right. Then I did a blood transfer to hard surfaces, and this is what you'll see a lot of times, that when you see a smudge or something that's discolored that is very light, back here, let's see here, up here in the top left-hand corner around the 11 o'clock position, you see a bunch of smudges. You can't really tell much about them, but those are all finger touches. And then, but there will be a time that as people handle different items, or they touch and the blood gets to a certain level, there is a perfect time during that transfer process as the body and the blood leaves the surfaces and is transferred to other surfaces, that it can create a great impression of a fingerprint. And that's another thing that we really look for. That in some of the higher volume areas, you're not going to be able to distinguish anything about ridge detail of a fingerprint. But on this one, and I didn't process this print with any type of chemicals. All I did, I ran it through a filter numerous times, and so that I could see the ridge detail of that fingerprint that was left from the synthetic blood that allowed this transfer to occur. And which a lot of times it takes a little bit of luck to be able to identify that fingerprint to an individual. But in this case, I'll probably go at this and I'll analyze it, and I'll do a fingerprint roll on my own, and I'll see how many characteristics and that I can identify, and see if this is an identifiable print. I'll get back with you and let you know how that worked out in one of my future shows. Then, of course, this is some of the heavier blood droplets I did with my fingertips and smudges and swipes, and there's no detail in them. And but like I said, anytime the body comes in contact with bloody surfaces, the ability of those transfers to increase the possibility of identifying an offender is greatly increased. And then on dark clothing, like I said, I didn't know if any of the victims may have possibly been wearing dark bed clothing for the night, whatever their night clothes would be. But on this shirt on the left, which was part of the Richard Allen Delphi case that I had did on a few months ago, and so that representing how Richard Allen may have been able to walk out of that crime scene wearing that dark clothing and nobody see any type of bloody clothing. This was the same transfers of just the synthetic blood onto the shirt, and you can't see. But when you introduce and process it with luminol and total darkness, of course, you can see on the right-hand side that it just pops, and you have everything from the arterial spurts at the bottom to the fingerprints, top left, to the full hand impression there on the right. And of course, law enforcement would be looking at those clothing and seeing if they're able to identify. You may not be able to identify an individual fingerprint, but you may be able to come up with a hand size or something else that would narrow the focus of individuals that possibly could be involved. And when you do have an offender, does that handprint fit within those parameters? And then I continued, and this is something else from one of my previous shows that I did, that I took a floor mat and introduced my footwear to the floor mat, and then I went and cleaned that floor mat. The floor mat on the left, I cleaned, scrubbed hard with just water, and then I used Dawn dish soap on the right-hand shoe print or footprint, and cleaned it. And as you can see, it looks like a brand new floor mat in a vehicle. And I put this in here for the fact that I'm hoping that since we have that bloody footprint from the residents, that hopefully some of it transferred to some part of that car, because even after cleaning, you can see on the right luminol, what effects it had when I processed it. And you would never realize that those shoe prints are there, and they're still over there. And I've got to check them. I mean, they won't change. They've been protected. They're inside, and they'll stay the same, preserved, and will react with luminol in the future. Should I choose to test them again, which I will. I just got to get some luminol in. I'm out of luminol. And but anyway, that's pretty much the show tonight. And if we have any questions, we'll answer them.
You have a few. All right. And we were going to talk about Honeybee being a new member, but her credit card was confiscated, so she's just updated. So we thank you for updating your credit card and staying with us. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your support.
All right. And single mom of 4, did someone run over Maggie? How did she get the tire impression on her thigh?
That's another case. That's a Murdoch case. Chris is doing a show on that or at some point, and we'll be talking about that, and we'll be addressing that on Monday night show. So tune in for that on Monday night.
Okay.
Good question. I know Chris is. We talked quite a bit about that today.
Susan Sell, is shadowing or ghosting possibly where the perp was standing?
Yes, and that's one of the things that it will bode well for the prosecution, and for hopefully that he will cross-contaminate his vehicle from the victim's blood and DNA, and for the fact of and hair and everything else that might occur during these violent encounters. Because if there's any type of high impact, such as fist slapping or anything that the victims may have, and there may have been other weapons that can be used both by the victims onto the offender, and the offender may have introduced other household items into the assaults and the attacks. Just because he has a knife doesn't mean that's the only thing he used against the victims. You have lamps, you may find some other type of object in a room, vase, and you may also strike victims, and victims may strike you with those that can create some of that high or medium velocity blood spatter that would create the ghosting effect, and maximizes the possibility of some type of cross contamination to his vehicle and to his residence.
Okay. And then we have Mike D. Experience gifted 5 memberships tonight. So
thank you
very much. We appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And then Judy Brown is a new member.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Y'all working out this other hand tonight now.
Yeah.
Right.
We're about to go to Texas in just a few weeks. That'll come in handy. Thank you.
We have Dale with a super sticker.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Let's see. Pidgey Mac at True Crime Web. Mr. Steve, in the case of Alec Murdoch, did the rain possibly wash away any ghosting evidence or blood spatter? Period.
Yeah, and that could have also happened. I think even with that one, yes, there was some rain that came in. I think it was very light, and that's on the Murdoch homicide again. And it's very possible it could have. And to what effect? And of course, the prosecution says that the washing down of the water hose, and because they kept introducing that there was a lot more water there than should have been there. And so is that what happened? I don't know. But with the Kohberger, there doesn't appear that there was any time of the narrow frame that he would have been able to clean up. And the weather conditions, while there was, it wasn't any snow on the ground other than some remnants of snow in certain areas, but it didn't snow for another day or two. So we won't have that effect here in the Coburger case.
Okay. Let's see here. And 829 and Truffles. Okay. And Truffles, the killer left fingerprints? Question mark.
Don't know. There is that possibility. Now, if he wore gloves, of course, then it's highly unlikely. But the if he didn't have, then yes, they may be there. Can they find them? Don't know. But anytime a criminal goes in any type of environment, there is the possibility for fingerprints. We know he left a shoe print from the affidavit, and we don't have anything that says that any fingerprints, because if they had a clear, identifiable fingerprint of him at the time of the probable cause affidavits, they would have. I would expect that would have been in the probable cause affidavit, and it's not there. So I don't expect that they had it then. That doesn't mean they won't have it tomorrow or next week or 6 months from now, because sometimes as you process new evidence or old evidence in new ways, or look at it in a different perspective, or use different chemicals, certain things can be developed, and you can develop new evidence and find new fingerprints or DNA. And I hope that will be the case. But I don't know of any fingerprints, and they weren't mentioned in any probable cause.
Okay. And SB 74 at True Crime Web, would you say there was a fair probability of the assailant cutting himself? Normally just on one assault, there's a high percentage that somewhere during the struggle that they would have cut themselves just with one victim. And now you have to multiply that by 4. And I'm hoping that is the case, and I'm hoping they have more DNA that will come back at some point. Because with 4 victims, I put out a very simple blood pattern on this first poster board. And in this residence, we won't be this simple. And it's easy to create these simple diagrams. And I just don't know how complex or how many different types of different patterns are within that residence, and the cast off patterns, and what the injuries were, and what parts of the room. But every time that, and it's probably a higher percentage than just 4 times more likely he cut himself, because as you tire, and, the first victim would have been his highest energy point. Second one, a little bit, at some point, nerves, your strength, your agility starts degrading. And the longer those fights are, the longer that there is or the greater there is a possibility that you might inflict some type of injury on yourself. And Phil Hamilton, Mr. Steve, in your opinion, do some of the big name blood experts such as Henry Lee and Michael Baden fudge their conclusions to help their clients and confuse the jury?
I hope not, but it certainly appears to be that way.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people out there, and you see that how can 2 people take the exact same evidence and come up with 180-degree determination of how that occurred? And sometimes it just doesn't make sense. And when it doesn't make sense, they have to be doing it for some purpose. And if that is to enrich their souls, then I'm not for that. Now, I've been at a seminar with Henry Lee. I've never, with Michael Baden, I've never listened to any of his seminars. I've seen him in the news, but never experienced any of his seminars or anything. And don't know much about him. And I don't even know. I know that there was a guy that in the Murdoch homicides that said that he worked under Henry Lee and was using, by his associations, that increased his qualifications. And which, I always believe you should stand on your own feet.
All right. And Miranda Lee, don't you think this is all speculation until we know what the actual evidence is in the Idaho 4 case?
Well, I'm not speculating that they have any of this blood evidence. I just know that I've never been to a knife attack that there wasn't this. And blood spatter is blood spatter. They'll use these terms, and they'll use cast off, they'll use blood transfers. So there's no speculation in that. So no, there's not speculation that, and we have this shoe transfer. And so is blood pattern analysis. If I was speculating that this is absolutely what they have, then yeah, you might say it's speculation. But in every assault, and we wouldn't be here where we at currently if there weren't some type of blood pattern analysis, and we know they did it before the fact that that's what experts do, and that's what CSI does. You go in there, you look at these blood patterns, and there's no speculation about it. Now, if I was looking at their evidence and trying to suggest certain things from the evidence they have, then yes, that's speculation. But just trying to inform people of what different types of blood patterns that may be in that house, then no, I don't think it's speculation. Good, everybody's open to their own opinion, of course, and so
ready?
Yep.
And Phil, Mr. Steve, what have you heard that makes you think Kohberger might plead guilty?
Well, they have a lot of. One thing I'm hoping for is that if he has a change of faith and he's absolutely wants to go that route, and if it does, then that's of course a possibility. We don't know if that will ever occur. You never know what a defendant will do all the way up, and I've seen juries selected and have been impaneled and waiting for the trial, and the defendant say no, I'm gonna go ahead and plea. I always hope for that. It saves a lot of time, and then of course we have to work through the plea deal as far as what he has to do for the state to accept it and for the court to accept it. And but no, I don't have any information other than I'm hoping that is the case, and I hope that the mountain of evidence that the prosecution has is enough to cause him to do a plea.
And Kathleen at Steve, in my opinion, in addition to digital, I believe we will find out at trial more evidence of blood forensics at crime scene and in his car.
Absolutely. I'm hoping it's there. I really do. Just due to the sheer number of victims and the possibility of how much transfer could have occurred. And I think we will find out that there's a lot of different types of blood evidence that was transferred throughout that residence and hopefully to his vehicle, into his home.
And Dave, Steve, do you believe BK intended on unaliving all 4 people?
That's a good question. That is a really good question. And absolutely, he targeted. We know he was there for at least one. We know that for a fact. For the fact that he entered that residence, and through the course of those attacks, it went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Going in with a knife knowingly against 4, I don't think, just my personal opinion, I don't believe that was, but I think he was discovered, and he was made that choice to continue. And I think when he left, either he was hurt or he was exhausted, and didn't have any fight left in him.
Okay. And Kathleen at Steve, I think you cleaning the mat and still seeing detail of footprints is incredible. Offenders think they remove or hide detail. Not happening.
It's extremely difficult. And you know, and I use mostly luminol for the fact that it's so effective. I have a lot of confidence in it that if it's there, and it's a presumptive test also, it will react with other chemicals too. But then that's how come when I cleaned this floor mat, I did one of them with just water only, no chemicals involved in it, to show you that it's not just reacting with the chemicals only. And then because some of the other chemicals that may be in Dawn dish soap may have a reaction to it, and generally it's a little bit different coloration, and not always, but and it, you know, you just have to be careful during these presumptive tests. And then, of course, you can go back and process it with other different types of chemicals that will have a reaction with blood or different elements of blood, and verify and become another test.
Multitasking.
She's getting better at it. She got her left hand back.
Hot dog. All right. And Debbie, question. When the trial happens, will you and Chris be walking us through it? Thank you for all the education you give us.
Chris and I haven't talked about that yet, and I'm sure we will. It depends on where we're at on some of the cold cases too, but as we move forward with those, but yes, we'll still be creating content as we move along these trials and things. Looking forward to it.
And from Jocelyn, do I remember correctly that BK was said to visit a medical clinic after the attacks? Do you think they did a search warrant for that doctor's appointment?
It's very possible. And there's a couple, 3 or 4 different reasons he may have done that doctor's appointment. One, either he was suffered an injury, or he was trying to create an alibi and creating a witness that says, no, I examined him just a few days later and he didn't have any injuries. So, I mean, you can look at it from that perspective, or you can look at that, yes, he did suffer an injury. We won't know until if law enforcement gets those medical records and they look at what he was complaining and why he was there. If it was just something that he scheduled for a routine checkup with no mention of any ills, then we have to look at, was he just trying to create an alibi by letting a professional look at him and say, no, he didn't have any injuries. He wasn't scratched. He wasn't cut. And so we don't know which way that currently.
Okay, I'm fixing to keep talking for just a second,
Okay.
please.
Uh-oh. Mrs. Steve, here's computer.
No, it's fine. I'm just trying to do something here real quick for somebody.
Okay. But
so
yeah, whenever, like I said, law enforcement, the training that we obtain during the process of these crime scenes, and you're not in there just as a single officer. You'll have a CSI unit that's in there, and some of them may not have all the training that the lead investigators or the top CSIs have, but they will understand how to process crime scenes to some level, and they're under the direct supervision of individuals that they're further along in their careers and their training, and there's a lot of questions asked, and there's a lot of discussions in crime scenes of what could have caused that. What does that look like to you? Because you see anything and everything, and some things are odd in crime scenes, and you just don't know what they mean at the time, and it may come to light during an interview 2 or 3 weeks later. Then it will explain that odd thing that you saw in that crime scene. and will make sense then. And so a lot of documentation has to happen and occur.
Okay. And
Honeybee,
Honeybee,
$3 super sticker. Thank you
so much.
Appreciate it.
And Kelly Parker, thoughts. Court TV just stated the house is going to be demolished. I'm not a conspiracy person, but that doesn't make sense.
I would hope that the courts wouldn't allow that until after, and I don't know what the time frame that is set for the house being demolished. Hopefully, it would be at least after the trial, but we'll see. That is interesting.
Okay. And Phil, Mr. Steve, is there much chance a jury can tell when one or both blood experts are fudging their conclusions?
There's something that is often said, and I don't know how true it is, that a lot of times when you have these experts that are 180 degrees, North Pole, South Pole, that juries will just say, don't know which expert's right, so we won't even consider the expert's testimony. And I hate it when it comes to that. And I hate that that is something that occurs more often than not. But yes, juries may often see that, and then they'll just come to their own conclusion of which one they want to go with, or they may not consider it at all. And but sometimes you can see that if they don't hire the right one, and that he's not able to clearly back up his opinions, then yes, I can see where sometimes juries would be able to say that, no, that and there, he ain't worth the salt.
Chris just donated 5 memberships.
Hey, Chris, good to see you.
Thanks for letting me use the blue light on you.
Yes, Chris, I look for, yeah. Chris and I, like I said, we talked earlier today, and getting ready for the weekend and getting ready for Monday.
Oh, and Dixie let me use the blue light too.
Hey, Dixie, thank you. Appreciate your support.
All right. And now Phil's got a good question.
Okay.
I'm a new member. How did you select your first 2 cold cases?
The 2 cold cases were the first 2 that selected me. I didn't go out and ask them for me to look into their cases. I received a email from an individual and said, "Would you look at my daughter's case?" And that's the case of Larry Crum with his daughter. It's been missing for 40 years in Texas, and that's a case that Chris and I, in just a few weeks, will be going out to Texas to see if we can't search some property that has come to our attention that needs to be searched. And so we'll be going out there. And through him and his support of Larry Crum's support, he's part of a support group that he and the other case that I'm working, Drew Collins, whose daughter Elizabeth is one of the victims of the Evandale murders in Iowa. And so that was the other cold case that I've started, and working 2 of them and at such long distances is about as much as I can do. And with Chris coming on board, it's going to be absolutely an answer to a prayer that will allow me to be able to focus in certain parts of what I can do in my skill sets, and allow us to be able to bring attention and generate leads, and using the skill sets that Chris has, and which absolutely is amazing. And I thank him for offering to help, and I absolutely embrace it. But that's how I got the first 2. One of them simply wrote to me, and then he was friends with the other, and they both, I absolutely will do anything and everything to see if we can't generate some type of leads to bring those cases to a close. All
righty. And Kathleen, Steve, can you please mention foundation name and access information. And I have to apologize because I have not sent the link to Jennifer to put in Nightbot. So that's my fault.
No, it ain't your fault.
Well,
We're just so busy. She's still doing the Cyclops and putting all those children in there. And I'm busy trying to get all the logistics ready for our trip to Texas, because we got people coming from 4 different states to Texas, and the housing and getting permissions and notifying the different things, and the Texas part of it is something that is part of the learning curve that I never realized it had to be done, as far as even the utilities. But we're getting all that up. But the it's truecrimeweb.com. You can go on the internet, type in truecrimeweb.com, and it will take you to our website. And on that website, there is a donation page to our foundation.
it's actually on the homepage.
It's on the homepage now.
Sorry.
Okay.
And there's a little button.
And there's a little donation button there on the homepage of truecrimeweb.com.
And it is a secure server, and you get a receipt as soon as you do it.
Yes. And like I say, it's a 501c, and we set it up so that people that wish to give through the foundation and want that were the taxes and everything, and benefit is something that we wanted to do. And we did.
All right, so no more questions on this.
Okay.
So let me cruise.
Appreciate everybody coming in tonight, and thank you for all your questions and all your support of the channel, the memberships and everything, because like I said, we wouldn't be able to do, when we first started this channel, we just wanted to become an ambassador for law enforcement and let people know how law enforcement looked at and processed crime scenes, and never realized that there was a need for a database of missing children focused just on teenagers and younger. And we started that, and then didn't realize that that there are so many families out there with cold cases, and that they would reach out to us. And we have other families that are asking about coming and submitting information. And I give advice to any family that calls me for anything. And I look forward to working with any of them, and as many as we can. And but that's just in the future as we move forward.
All right. And Dwayne's Prospecting Adventures.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. And I'm still scrolling.
Yeah.
And Dwayne's Prospecting Adventure says he still hasn't forgotten about you.
Yeah. We exchanged phone numbers.
Oh, I got you.
And
Okay. All right.
we've just been so busy, we can't get with
I
it.
got you.
Yeah.
I got you. All right. So nothing else out
Mhm.
here. Anything you can think of to share?
No, but other than, like I said, I had a great conversation with another former law enforcement guy out there that has a YouTube channel, a Ruckus Rocks podcast, and I talked to him quite a bit. I'm going to at some point go down to Florida and meet up with him and talk to him.
I'm going on that trip.
She's going on the trip with me, and see if there's anything that we can do down there in his neck of the woods. And absolutely intelligent guy, great interviewer. And if you get a chance, check out his YouTube page or YouTube channel. Then that's Ruckus Rocks Podcast.
Yep. And his link is posted in chat.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's see here what we got going
And
here.
if you subscribe and you get on his shows, tell him I sent you. I want him to call me back. No, but we had a great conversation today. He's funny. Absolutely funny. He's a toss up with Chris. Chris is absolutely hilarious on the phone also. I enjoy speaking with him.
That's funny. All right. And Catatonics has a question about sending money privately. You can do that through PayPal, which the link is in chat, or the donating through the foundation from the homepage of the website. Either way. Thank you so much.
And you can contact me if you have any questions or If there's any other way that you wish to communicate, we'll just send me an email, steve@truecrimeweb.com.
Molly's going with me to Florida.
Okay.
All right. So let's see here. Florida's been beautiful the last 2 days. Oh.
Yeah. One of my guys that went through on the way to Florida went through over in South Carolina past the Moselle property in the Murdoch homicides on the way to Florida.
Let's see here. All right. I think you're good.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate everybody that's been here tonight, and we appreciate your support. And I don't know. I'm trying to find something I want to end up on. I think that's probably that's probably the most non-offensive one of all the of just the luminol stains.
There you go.
All right, but y'all stay safe out there. We appreciate everybody's support and everyone coming in, viewing the channel. If you liked it, subscribe, share it, and reach out to these other
up on the way out.
And thumbs up on that, and go out and support Chris and support Ruckus, and we appreciate it, guys. And I'll see y'all in a couple of days.
Love y'all.
Bye-bye.